Good afternoon, everyone. You are in the spotlight with Brian Gardner for this Friday, December the 11th, 2015. This In the Spotlight 411 show coming at you here on this Friday afternoon for our Football Blitz show for this week. Uh, we have a great show coming at you here today. As is usually the case for these football shows, we'll look back at last week's NFL games, look ahead to this week. We'll talk about last night's Thursday night football game, which, boy, do I wish we did this football show before last night's game. That's definitely a game I would have made a pick for. That tremendous game. We'll talk about that game, and on the college football side of things, which we're going to actually start with today, which we don't usually do, but we're going to start with that today. We're going to start by talking about the college football playoff rankings, the final edition of the college football playoff rankings. And the four teams that made the playoffs, the teams that will be playing for a national championship. We'll talk about those. A lot of people have asked me, because I remember when I said last week, I said that we talk about the final playoff rankings, talk about who made the playoffs, all that good stuff. I mentioned that we talk about the bowls. We're not going to talk about the bowls this week. What we're going to do, and I think I lost my pen top, but okay, that's neither here nor there. What we're going to do is you all remember last year we did kind of like a mini bowl preview kind of thing. We are going to do that, but we're going to wait to do that. And we'll probably wait until, we'll probably do it next Thursday or next week when we do our next football show next week. We'll do that. I don't want to do that today because I think so much right now is about the playoffs, the four teams that made the playoffs. Let's focus on that, kind of give a general overview. And obviously we'll be talking, I'm not going to make picks for who I think is going to win officially today. We'll do that as we get closer to the actual playoffs around New Year's. But give you a general overview, look at the games and all that. And that's pretty much it. I don't want to do too much with it right now because you know what's going to happen as we get closer to the bowls and as we get closer to these games, we're going to end up doing it again. So we're kind of being repetitive about it. So today, we'll talk about the rankings, give a general overview of the four teams that made it, and that will be that. And then we're going to do a little bit with the Heisman because people have been asking me, and I haven't done anything with it, and there's a reason why. As I talked about on our primetime show last night, look, it hasn't been the most interesting Heisman race, to be honest. But we'll talk about it, do a little bit with that, and then that will be our college football stuff for today. Then next week, on our next football show next week, we'll do a lot more in terms of picking the bowl games. We won't talk about the playoff games because we'll do that when we get closer to the actual bowl games. Last year, I made a mistake of making picks for all the bowl games and then throwing in the playoff games too. I'd rather keep the playoff games separate than the actual bowl games. Okay, so next week we'll do a little bit we'll talk about the bowl games, what games we think are going to be the best, et cetera, and make predictions for those. And then the week after, we'll get into talking about the playoff games. And the week after that, I think we'll talk about the playoff games, make picks for them because that'll be the week before New Year's. It makes sense to do it then. So that's the way we'll work this. For those of you that are interested in us talking about the bowls, not just the playoffs, we'll start doing that a little bit more next week. So, all right. So today is just more about talking about the playoff rankings and the four playoff teams and how that all shook out, and then the Heisman. So that'll be our college football stuff. And we're going to start with that today. But before we do that, let me remind you all the ways which you can interact and contribute to our show. You can do so by emailing us at itspotlight411@gmail.com. You can also follow us and tweet us at itspotlight411. And please remember to use the hashtags, hashtag itspotlight411 or hashtag ITS5, because that ITS5 hashtag represents our 5th anniversary on the air as a podcast. You can also use hashtag ITS Football Blitz if you'd like, since this is the Football Blitz show. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for In the Spotlight 411 and make sure you like our page upon finding it. All right, so as I said, we're going to start with college football here today, and it was an interesting final weekend of college football. And look, you give the committee props for doing it right. All right. Now, look, last year, for the most part, they did it right, too. All right? The only one I had a quibble with last year was Alabama. Okay, that's the only one I had a quibble with last year with Alabama. I didn't think Alabama should have made it. I still maintain that, but I digress. The fact of the matter is, for the most part, they did good last year with this. This year, look, a lot of their work was done for them. Let's be honest here, okay? The last few weeks, Baylor, TCU, Notre Dame, Ohio State, they all played their way out of it. They all played their way out of it. LSU, they all played their way out of it. So, all you were left with was Clemson, Alabama, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Iowa going into the last weekend. And the Michigan State-Iowa thing was going to settle itself because these two teams are going to play each other. So the winner of that game was going to make it. Oklahoma had already cemented because everybody else in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU had fallen off. So they had cemented their bid. There was nobody else in the SEC challenging. Alabama had cemented their bid, providing they win in their final weekend. Clemson had solidified their bid, providing they won. And, North Carolina, was the only flying ointment to really Clemson. But it was really really going into the weekend, as long as everybody won. Oklahoma was idle anyway. As long as everybody won, they're going to make it. And it was about who won that Michigan State-Iowa game. Everything else had played itself in. In order for anybody else to get into this thing, like the loser of Michigan State, Iowa really would have made it to begin with. Ohio State, Stanford, Notre Dame, any of these teams to sneak in, they needed Clemson to probably lose and Alabama to probably lose. You need both those teams to lose. Yep, and let's be realistic. Both of them the chance of both of them losing were very slim. One chance of one losing wasn't that bad, but chance of both, come on. So really, the most of the work was done on the field for the committee. It was about seeding them and deciding what you're going to do. Now, you could quibble with the seeding. Obviously, there's been people over the last few weeks that think Clemson should have been number one. They looked good in their final game over the weekend. North Carolina with a valiant effort, but Clemson, that's the best Clemson looked in that game against Carolina. They made some critical mistakes, yes. But in that second half, I think that's the best they've looked in a little while, to be honest. So, that probably helped the committee in keeping them on the one line. Alabama, Florida kept it closer than it probably should have in that game, in the SEC championship game, but Alabama eventually got control, and that was it. And, once, Alabama we knew was going to be a 2. The only question was whether Alabama was the 1 or the 2. And then Clemson was going to be the 1 or 2. The 1 and 2 spots were locked up, okay? It's just a matter of how they shook up. Maybe people didn't buy into Clemson enough, so they put them at 2, and they put Alabama at 1. Maybe people bought into Clemson enough, so they put them at 1 and put Alabama at 2. Now, seeing Oklahoma drop down to the 4 when they were idle this week was not really a surprise, even though Oklahoma, by all intents and purposes, is the hottest team momentum-wise in college football right now. Seeing Oklahoma drop, though, when they're idle is not so surprising because Michigan State played in probably what was the best college football game of this season against Iowa. And them winning that game in the fashion they wanted it and the way that game played out, seeing Michigan State leapfrog over Oklahoma is not at all surprising, especially in light of how competitive the Big Ten was and how competitive that game was. So that was really no surprise there in terms of that seeding, putting Michigan State at 3 and Oklahoma at 4. And let's talk about that Michigan State-Iowa game, which, like I said, I thought was the best college football game of this season. Just a classic game, back and forth, both teams going. Then the final drive where Michigan State had like almost a 10-minute drive in terms of time of possession, a 10-minute drive from the quarterback getting in with bad shoulder and all, getting fifth-year senior, mind you, and I'm blanking on his name right now. I apologize. I'm blanking on a lot of names today. It's Friday. Give me a break. The quarterback, running for it on that 4th down and making it, stretching out his arm, bad shoulder and all, to the running back who had a fantastic football game. Just a fantastic football game he had. LJ Scott was the running back's name. I apologize. I remember his name. But yeah, he had a fantastic game and makes that big play late and to get into the end zone. And just what a tremendous game by Michigan State. And look, the fact of the matter is, both these teams, you know, if you could take both these teams into the playoffs, you would have. Both these teams were fantastic regular season and in this game. I thought your heart had a break for Iowa. It's just rough. You hate to lose that kind of game, and to have it, you know, anybody that you know that's ever played football, or anybody you ever heard that talk about the game of football, one of the ways that they feel the most helpless is when a team has a long drive going on at the fourth quarter, and they take up most of the fourth quarter on a drive. You know, if you're the offense, you're sitting there watching, and especially a quarterback, you're sitting there watching, and you see the time slipping and slipping away. And this drive keeps going on and on and on. Your defense just keeps getting more and more exhausted because this drive's been going on for so long. See that in the fourth quarter. There's no more helpless feeling in a football game than that. I mean, because it's out of your control. You're sitting there and you're like, you can't do anything to do. Stop it. You're seeing the game slip away. You're seeing the game slip away right before your very eyes. And you can't do anything to stop it. If you're the offense, you're sitting there watching a 10-minute drive take place. It was a phenomenal drive. And a great end to the game and a great end. And it's very fitting that game was the last regular season college football game this year because it was the perfect way to cap off the season, which was a good season. So good job to Michigan State. A heartbreaking loss for Iowa, but a great season for Iowa. And now you got your top four. Clemson, Alabama, Michigan State, Oklahoma. You're going to have yourself Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama, Michigan State. Clemson, Oklahoma is a rematch of a bowl game last year. It should be a tremendous game. I think most people are probably leaning towards Oklahoma there. I think I could see, again, with all the momentum Oklahoma has versus how the way Clemson has played down the stretch, I could totally see that being an upset. Alabama, Michigan State's a little bit more even keel. But again, Michigan State comes in with, while Alabama's played very well, Michigan State comes in with a tremendous amount of momentum from the way to end the season. You know, they beat Ohio State, then they come and beat Iowa in dramatic fashion. You know, Michigan State and Oklahoma have the most momentum, and momentum we know matters. You know, and on the college basketball, you go into March Madness with momentum, it matters. Last year we saw with the college football playoff, momentum mattered. Look at Ohio State. They had momentum going in. They were the dark horse. They came in and they won the whole thing. Both Michigan State and Oklahoma quantify as dark horses. You could totally see both one of these teams winning the national championship. I actually think, and I'm not making official predictions here today. I actually think one of them is going to win the national championship. I do not think Clemson or Alabama is going to. I think Michigan State, Oklahoma, both these teams are going to look like the top two teams in the nation right now. I think one of those two teams is going to win the national championship. I really do. I think it should be a tremendous playoff. I mean, they definitely have the four best teams there. No question about it. I think everybody that's in the four deserves to be there. Should be a great playoffs, great matchups. I think they were seated exactly right. You could have shifted Clemson and Al. I mean, you could have shifted something, but you know, I don't really have that much of a issue with it. I think they're right, you know, as far as seeding goes. So it should be exciting. And to the teams that just missed, especially Iowa, that's a heartbreaker for them. But you know, they had the chance to get in. They lost the game, and that was it. You know, but Stanford, Ohio State, Notre Dame, you know, they all essentially knocked themselves out of contention. Ohio State was there, lost a game late, out of contention. Notre Dame was there, lost a game late, knocked out of contention. You know, Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU, Florida, they all had their chances. Even North Carolina did. It was all earned on the field this year. You can't, you know, curse out the committee. You can't do anything like that because it was all earned on the field this year. There's no controversy. Nobody left out. It was all earned on the field this year. And you love that because you can't blame anything on the committee. It's all on the teams. That's the way it should be. It was all decided on the field. And that's the way it should be. So as I said, you know, we'll talk about the bowl games next week, all the bowl games. Or we start talking about them and previewing them. And then we'll talk about the playoff games as we get closer to the event in a couple of weeks. Make some predictions, all that good stuff. It should be a tremendous bowl season. It should be a tremendous playoffs. some great matchups, which we'll go over and preview over the next few weeks. Should be a lot of fun. And it was a great regular season in college football, a great finish with the championship games. It's just great. And again, the last 2 years of college football, it's been that's what the playoffs have done. It's been so good, so much better than a computer deciding things. So they've really saved it. They really kind of saved college football for the mainstream. I'm glad they did. I'm glad that they got these playoffs now. It makes it more interesting, makes it more fun. So good for them. Good for them. One other thing I want to add to, I'll highlight Stanford. Even they played a championship game against USC. They looked very good in that game, and that was a fun game to watch too. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, that was a fun game to watch too. So kudos to Stanford, because I remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about how Stanford had no chance. They kind of played their way back in. So kudos to them. I wanted to highlight them because we were talking so much about the championship games and how they played a role in the final playoff rankings. I wanted to make sure I mentioned Stanford and their performance. They had a great performance in that game, which leads to the Heisman, which will be announced over the weekend. And we haven't talked much about the Heisman. It has not, again, as I said earlier, it has not been the most exciting Heisman race this year. Leonard Fournette kind of played his way out of it. You got Derrick Henry in there. You got McCaffrey in there. It's really all about the running backs. Clemson's Deshaun Watson, who's the quarterback. That's the only quarterback only in play. I do not think Deshaun Watson's going to get it, and here's why. Not that he doesn't deserve it. First of all, he's the only quarterback on the board that has a chance at getting it, but because so much of the way these things hash out, okay, and this goes for MVPs and professional sports as well. So much of the way these things hash out is dependent on performance at the highest level and on the biggest platform. So your performance on primetime games, like games in prime time, your performance in championship games, your performance against a major rival or against a team that's maybe you're playing against for the regular season title. Those kind of things are what dictates a lot of times how you win. That's what really knocked Leonard Fournette out, was not just that he had a bad, one or two bad performances. He had these bad performances against teams that, in prime time, against good teams, against teams that were among the highlights of his team's season, against teams that they're battling for, battling in the SEC for either as a rival or as for regular season championship or regular season title, or to go to the conference championship game. Basically big situations. He did not perform well in these big situations, in these big games, and that hurts more than him having one bad performance against a bad team. The guys that are in play, these final three, Alabama's Derrick Henry, Stanford's Christian McCaffrey, Clemson's Deshaun Watson, they all, for the most part, were consistent, but they also performed well at the highest level on the biggest platforms, prime time against a rival, championship games, conference championship game against a regular season, a team that you're battling for the regular season title. They played well in these situations. They made big plays. They had memorable moments. Memorable moments against big teams, big-time teams. And that's why they're the final three. And that's why you can conceivably you can make an argument for any of the three. And I think that's probably why this race this year has not been a good Heisman race. On one hand, you might say, well, because it's wide open, it should be more fun. Not necessarily. Not always. Because, again, it really has been one of those kind of when nobody has stuck out that much. These three guys are all good players. They're not great. They're good. I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to take anything away from them, because they're not. They've all had good seasons, good careers, but they're not great. They're not the kind of players that, that I believe 10 years down the road that we're going to be talking about. I thought Fournette might be. He might still be. We're not talking about Leonard Fournette. The only one of these guys I think has the potential to be something like that we might be talking about is McCaffrey, which is why I'd probably pick Christian McCaffrey to be the Heisman winner. That'd be my pick because I think he's got the best chance at having a very long, sustainable NFL career where we're talking about him 10 years down the road. The other two, I don't. And that's not a knock on them. There's been many college football players that have gone to the NFL and been great role players, good players. Maybe not great, but good. What I mean by great is upper tier. What I mean by great is Pro Bowl, MVP kind of guys, guys that, make the big bucks, that are big time players, like Adrian Peterson's, Drew Brees's, Aaron Rodgers, those kind of guys. I don't see any of these three being slam dunks to be that. Now I could be wrong. And I said McCaffrey probably has the best chance to be that, which is why I'd pick him. Derrick Henry's a great football player. Deshaun Watson's a great quarterback, great football player. Christian McCaffrey the same way. They're great football players, good football players. I won't say great. I should stop throwing around great if I don't want to label them as that. They're all good football players. They've all had good seasons. But none of these three strike me right now as great. And my feeling is that they won't be striking me as great 10 years from now either. But the one with the best chance from what I've seen, and I've watched a lot of him this year, is Christian McCaffrey. And that's who I'd give the Heisman to. Now, let's think about this for a second. Sometimes when with these kind of awards, a lot of times it could come down to, hey, are you in the playoffs or not? Stanford's not in the playoffs. Alabama and Clemson are. Maybe that eliminates McCaffrey from the discussion. It could. You weren't good enough to help lead your team into the playoffs. Sometimes that hurts in professional sports MVP voting too. That you don't lead your team to a playoffs, or your team's having a bad season. We shouldn't award it to you because you didn't as good as you were. There's others that had comparable performances and their teams made it. Had great seasons. Stanford still had a good season, but they're not in the playoffs. That could play a role. If not McCaffrey, I honestly believe if they use the logic, okay, and one never really knows with these things. Sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. But if they use the logic that they're not giving it that Christian McCaffrey, we're not going to hand it to McCaffrey because Stanford didn't make the playoffs, wasn't one of the top 4 teams. If they use that logic, then I think it's very likely that they give the Heisman to Deshaun Watson. Because then their argument's going to be, well, he's the quarterback for the number 1 team in the country. They'll use that logic. So that's the way I look at it. If they use that logic to decide, if that's the logic they use to decide whether to give it to McCaffrey or not, then I think Deshaun Watson's going to be the winner. Because I think that same logic applies. Like, okay, we're looking at everything on we're not looking deeper into the number. We're just looking at where you finished and if your performance made the impact on your team to get to get them, to the so-called promised land, which is the playoffs. McCaffrey's performance didn't get the team to the playoffs. Deshaun Watson's did. So if they try to go, well, Stanford didn't make the playoffs, so we really shouldn't give it to McCaffrey, then falling in line with that same logic is giving it to Deshaun Watson because he's the quarterback of the number 1 team in the country that's unbeaten. So it would make sense for that logic to apply. We'll see. McCaffrey would be my pick. Who do I think they're going to go with? My feeling is I think Deshaun Watson probably. I don't think they're going to use the logic I just mentioned. So I think I think Derrick Henry's going to get it. I don't think they're going to use the logic I just mentioned. I don't think they will. I don't think they're gonna use the whole Stanford didn't make the playoffs. Clemson's #1 team unbeaten. I don't think they're gonna use that. I think they're gonna give it to Derrick Henry. And I could see some of the voters using that logic I just mentioned, and that might be enough to split the ballot, and that gives Derrick Henry the Heisman. So that's kind of what I see. That's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting the ballots kind of get split between McCaffrey and Watson, and then Derrick Henry gets the Heisman. We'll see. McCaffrey would be my choice, though. All right. So that's all the college football stuff we're going to do today. So let's jump into the NFL. And look back at what was the first weekend of the so-called stretch run as we approach the playoffs. And it was a week that we previewed last week that might settle a lot of kind of get rid of, if you will, weed out the rest of those teams that don't have really much chance left at making the playoffs. Also, it might help to solidify those teams that are already in, get some solidify seeds, all that good stuff. Let's start off first though with what was an incredible. We never talked about this last week. Incredible Thursday night game. Sometimes you see a team. Sometimes you see a team stare their season in the face and go, well, see it slipping away and go, all right, this is it. We need to step up. Last Thursday night, the Packers saw their season slipping away. They had not played well. The only game that they had won was that game against the Vikings. They had not played well. Them and the Falcons had fallen off at the same time. And the Falcons still haven't gotten back up. But, the Packers, it's been a struggle. Offensive efficiency has been the thing. The defense has been that bad, especially considering how they usually perform. They get down 17-0 in the first quarter against the Lions. The Lions were played very well in the last couple of weeks, trying to salvage their season play, doing very well at playing spoiler. The Packers go into the third quarter 17-0. And you're thinking, this is it. They score 14 in the third, go into the third quarter down 20-14. Score 13 points in the fourth quarter and win the game 27-23 on a Hail Mary late in that game. First of all, that was one of the most incredible moments I've ever seen in an NFL game. One of the most incredible comebacks I've ever seen in an NFL game. It probably is one of the most incredible comebacks. With everything, with so much on the line, with their chance to make the playoffs on the line, with their season on the line, and the way they were playing, go into the game and throughout the game. It was a big-time performance by Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. A big-time performance. And it's the kind of game that can turn around your season. Because you take so much momentum out of the game to make that miraculous play at the end, which was incredible. That can turn around your season. You could look back on that game and say, that's the week that the Packers came back. That's the week that the Packers woke up. And if that team rides through the NFC and somehow makes the Super Bowl, then you look, like, that was the turning point of the entire season. And it's to show you how it changes the complexion. They come out of that game 8-4. If they had lost that game, they would have been 7-5. It's a big difference. It's a huge difference. And it's a huge difference because it keeps them tied for their division with the Vikings, who lost this week. It puts them right there in the crux of the playoffs. The Lions, who, while mathematically they could still potentially make it, and you cling to that as a team, but just trying to, playing for pride, trying to salvage their season. knocks them down a little bit. A team that had hurt the Packers a few weeks prior. It's a big-time performance in Week 13 as you gear up, stretch run the playoffs here. The playoffs are in sight. Seeing it slip away to do that in that fashion, incredible game for the Packers. Incredible game. Huge game. One of the biggest games of the weekend, one of the biggest turns of the weekend was that game. I mentioned the Vikings. Let's mention the Vikings. That was one of the games of the weekend. Seahawks and Vikings. Vikings just never got out of the gate. Only put one touchdown on the board, and that was late in the third. And that was in the third quarter. Russell Wilson coming in. Thomas Rawls. You haven't heard about Thomas Rawls. He's been filling in for Marshawn Lynch. He has been amazing, amazing for the Seahawks as a back. Amazing. Baldwin had a big game. The Seahawks just, defensively and offensively just knocked around the Vikings in this game. Vikings just never got out. That's huge because with the Packers coming back and winning, they're right back in. They're now tied again for the division lead as we head into Week 14. Huge. And the Vikings losing that game at home where they've been dominant all season. So both teams still in very good position to make it, but that's a big shift because you get the division, you're going to get a bye. It's a big win for the Seahawks, who all of a sudden have put together a streak here. They're at 7-5 right now. They're starting to look like they looked last year when everybody kind of left them for dead late in the season, and then they put together a string of wins, get into the playoffs, and end up making the Super Bowl again. The Seahawks know this year that they won't be able to put together a run that will help them win the division this year, like they did last year, because the Cardinals ain't going to cooperate with that because they've been healthy. But they know they can make the playoffs still. And right now, they're in prime position to do that. They just got to keep winning games. But that's the worst news for the NFC because the Seahawks are starting to play like the Seahawks again. They're starting to make the alterations they need to get to fix their secondary and cover teams downfield. Their defense has improved downfield. And that was their biggest issue. They're starting to fall into a rhythm. They're starting to play like the Seahawks just in time for the playoffs again. And they want their redemption for last year. So the NFC right now has a new foil, and it's the Seahawks. So that's going to make things interesting as we go forward here. So the Seahawks solidify their position firmly entrenched in the playoff situation. Vikings and Packers are going to still duke it out for that division. Not solidifying their position was the Falcons, who really, I think, at this point, we have to look at them and say they're done. They went from 5-0 to 6-6. They lose to the Buccaneers, who are now tied with them in terms of playoff rankings. Buccaneers win 23-19. We said last week that this could be an upset. I called it. It's the NFC South. The Buccaneers especially have a tendency to pull these kind of things out. The NFC South is always fraught with upsets. Here it was. The Buccaneers, very much a team that does this quite a bit over the years. They do it again. Jameis Winston with a great game. Doug Martin ran for 95 yards, 1 touchdown. Matt Ryan is taking a lot of flack for the way that the team's performing. Look, the bottom line is the Falcons have fallen completely off. The Packers have at least won a couple games here and there to keep themselves afloat. The Falcons have not. I think the Falcons have done. You see all these other teams solidifying their playoff position. The Seahawks, the Vikings, the Packers, all in play. The NFC East, we'll see how that works its way out. But, these teams are solidifying their position. The Falcons have not. Even the Buccaneers have done more to solidify their position. I think the Falcons are done. I think that was a straw that broke the camel's back. And look, a lot needs to happen for teams like the Buccaneers, the Falcons at this point with the 6-6 record. For those kind of teams to make it. If you're at 6-6, a lot has to happen for you to make it. But you're still in play. But you're kind of on the outside looking in. And when you get to that, when you're on the outside looking in and coming out of Week 13, you're more or less on the pretender side of things. You're not really a strong contender anymore. You're the kind of team that we talk about being weeded out at this point. Another team that I think we can say is done is the Rams, who started off the season so well with the big win at Arizona, and Seahawks that they've dropped to 4-8 after a loss to the Cardinals, 27-3. It's a redemption win for the Cardinals. Again, 4-8 ain't going to do it. The Rams are out, and the Cardinals, of course, solidifying themselves further, and really, in all essence, they're just slowly putting away the NFC West. On the NFC side, I think we're so focused on the NFC side of things. A huge win. 2 huge wins. One, the Panthers, who continued to remain unbeaten with a big late win over the Saints, 41-38. That officially knocked out the Saints for the most part. That also clinched the Panthers their division. Look, you got to commend the Panthers. Cam Newton's an MVP candidate, 331 yards, 5 TDs, 28 for 40. He's had an incredible season. Their defense was, it might not look like it, but their defense did incredible when it needed to. The Saints did everything in their power. The Saints played their best game in weeks, I thought, but this wasn't enough. And to beat the Saints at home, and that was the final nail in the coffin for the New Orleans Saints. And it's a big win for the Panthers because it salted away the division. They keep the unbeaten streak alive, and it really. You can't imagine a situation where they're not going to be the 1 seed in the NFC East. It was a big turn for them. It's a big win. And a heartbreaking one for the Saints. To come that close. They played the Panthers the best of anybody this year. They've come the closest to beating them, for the most part, twice. Panthers just find a way to get it done every week. That's what they do. Big win on the NFC side of things that we're going to one more big win on the NFC side of things, the Eagles, who a couple weeks ago, not even a couple weeks ago, last week, we were saying we're done. We were saying that they were done. Well, because of the topsy-turvy nature of the NFC East, which featured a Cowboy win over the Redskins on Monday night, so that was another big win, and the Cowboys, Romo or not, are actually still theoretically alive for the playoffs. Despite how ugly that game was and how back and forth it was with the Redskins scoring, this one score. It's a crazy end of game. ESPN's got to be in their glories. For better or worse, whether it's ugly or not, they keep getting good games as far as drama goes at the end of the game. Cowboys, that was a huge win. It keeps them alive. Now, I don't think anybody actually buys that the Cowboys can actually win this thing with all the injuries they have and that. But that, if you look on the flip side of things, mathematically, Cowboys are very much still alive. More than mathematically, they're right there. But on the flip side of things, this is more important for the Redskins, who had so much momentum. They beat the Giants. They come into this game and they lose. Now they drop to 5-7. The Eagles pull off the unthinkable and beat the Patriots 35-28. And really, in all honesty, they were trouncing the Patriots in this game. Trouncing them. Until they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit and let them back in. But they held on. And that's a game that the Eagles probably didn't, if they circle on their calendar, of course, they probably were going to try to get the game, but it's probably a game that they didn't expect to win. But they got it. And now they're tied for first. And we'll talk about the Patriots' circumstances coming out of this game in a minute. It's a huge win for the Eagles. Their offense looked good. They had some good momentum. Sproles looked good. They finally look like they got the running back situation well. They're doing more with Sproles than they are with Murray because it suits the offense more. They finally got a rhythm going. They got this win on the road at New England in December, where they don't lose in December in New England. Okay? Patriots don't lose in December, period. But so that's what makes this even more of a shock. They got the win, and that keeps their playoff hopes alive. And the criticism of Chip Kelly and the entire Eagles team can kind of take a seat for a little bit. Because now, not only did they beat the Patriots in New England, but they are right now tied for first place. They are very much in the playoff picture for a chance to win this thing. So they're very much back in play. Giants suffered a loss as well to the Jets, 23-20. They're at 5-7, so you got a three-way tie for the division between the Redskins, the Giants, and the Eagles, with the Cowboys a game back. So that's going to go right down to the wire. It's going to be crazy, and it is the worst division in football, but it's going to be a crazy finish, that's for sure. There's a lot of talent in the division. If you look at the Giants, you look at the Eagles, they shouldn't be 5-7, but they are. It's the way it went. It's the way it goes. And it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting finish there. So that's the story on the NFC side of things. We mentioned the Patriots, who the Eagles surprisingly beat. That win, that was probably the biggest turn of events in regards to the AFC that we've seen thus far. And here's why. You think back to a few weeks ago when we had all these unbeaten teams, the Bengals, on the AFC side, I should say, all these unbeaten teams on the AFC side, the Bengals, the Broncos, the Patriots. Broncos lose. Bengals lose. Both teams lost 2 games. Peyton Manning goes down for the Broncos. Osweiler at the quarterback position. They all of a sudden stabilized. They beat the Patriots. But that's still 1 game behind the Patriots. Bengals, stabilized a little bit the last few weeks. Still sitting there with 2 losses, as are the Broncos. But the Broncos, of course, have got a win over the Patriots. You see the Patriots lose to the Eagles this weekend at home. And if you're the Bengals and if you're the Broncos, you send a thank you card to Philadelphia. If you're any team in the AFC, you send a thank you card to the Philadelphia Eagles. Because they gave the Patriots that all-important second loss. And what's important about that second loss is it knocks the Patriots from a 1 seed all the way down to a 3 seed. A week ago, you would have signed up for them just being a 2. 2 weeks ago, you would have signed up just for them being a 2 because you knew they were going to likely be a high seed. To have them drop to a 3 is huge because that means they might not even get a bye. And the big games and the big games late in the AFC playoffs, they're not going to have home field. It's huge. Denver, the Bengals take the 1. Denver takes the 2. And we talked about this in the early season. If you're the AFC teams, you want that game to not be played in New England. Because it's so much easier to play New England on the road than it is at home. And right now, the setup is there. Now, it's very unlikely that the Bengals and the Broncos are probably going to go through the rest of the season unbeaten. And I highly doubt the Patriots are going to, even with all the injuries they have, and I know they have a lot of injuries, and that's probably why they've fallen off here. Okay? And depending on whether these injured players get back in time or not, that's probably going to determine how far they go in the playoffs. Because, we talked about the Patriots over the last couple of weeks. They had a lot of close calls, and I said they were due to lose, and they lost 2 weeks in a row, which is I think hasn't happened in years. And with the injuries, you understand why. And, they are very vulnerable. They are very vulnerable right now. And if things stay the same for them, they're going to be extremely vulnerable in the playoffs. Having said all that, based on their schedule, based on their schedule over the next couple of weeks, I don't think the Patriots are losing any more regular season games. So the onus is going to fall on the Broncos and the Bengals to win their games. I think at least one of them will. I don't think both of them will. Now, the key here is this. You don't want, if you're the rest of the AFC, and you're those top 2 AFC teams right now, you don't want the Patriots to get home field at all. You don't want them to play their way back into 2 seasons. That's why it's so important for the Bengals and the Broncos to win out. That's what the rest of the AFC is probably hoping for. That's obviously what the Bengals and the Broncos are hoping for. So we'll see how it shakes out. But that game, boy, not only did it turn the NFC East into around, with the Eagles winning it, but it turned the whole AFC around with the Patriots losing. The rest of the big AFC developments, the Steelers on Sunday Night Football get a win over the Colts. Colts is, again, it was a bad matchup. I mentioned this. It was a huge a bad matchup. Steelers on both sides of the football were just flat out better, and it wasn't pretty. 45-10. The Colts got a break because the Bills beat the Texans. So both Colts and the Texans still tied for the division. So, it's still go out there next week and win your game. Control your own destiny for the Colts and the Texans. You turn your back on it. The Colts had great momentum coming into this game. It's great momentum coming into they had great momentum coming into this game. Just that they ran into a better team and playing them on the road. Hey, it's tough to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. So Steelers got a win that they so badly needed. They advanced to 7-5. Colts again to 6-6. Texans also, as I mentioned, at 6-6, suffer a loss to the Bills on the road. Bills beat them 30-21. This is a solid win for the Bills. Gets them back at 500. Bills just got to keep winning. They're alive, but barely. Especially because the Jets pulled off a big win against the Giants, 23-20. In a very good game, a defensive battle. Giants did get the job done very well defensively. A much better defensive effort than a lot of their games this year. Just wasn't enough, though. The Jets got them into overtime and just made the plays late, got the field goal late. And it was a big win for the Jets, who are at 7-5, still with a leg up as far as the playoff proceedings go in the AFC over the Bills. Like I said, that's been the battle all year, Jets and Bills. So, but both teams very much still alive. Bengals solidified their position further with a win over the Browns, 37-3. They're at 10-2, so they're looking good right now. They've had a good couple weeks here. If you had any hope for the Jaguars, it's gone now. They dropped to 4-8 after a loss to the Titans, 42-39. Titans finally get a big win. Mariota and company pulled it out. Great offensive game for them. Not much defensively for them, but still they got a win. That's all they were hoping for pride's sake. Jaguars a couple weeks ago mathematically were right there. I never bought into them. I saw a lot of people look at them and go, hey, Jaguars have a chance. And well, not so much anymore. Broncos, it wasn't very pretty. It wasn't Osweiler's best, but they got the job done 17-3 over the Chargers, who trying to play spoiler, didn't really do a good job of it. Broncos improved to 10-2, so like the Bengals, they've continued to further certify their positioning here. Chiefs continue to roll 34-20. They beat the Raiders. I think that's it for the Raiders. Chiefs at 7-5, right up there with the Jets and the Steelers. So very much a battle there. All those teams still in play, along with the Bills at 6-6. And of course the Colts and the Texans all at 6-6. But the Raiders, 5-7. I mean, I guess they could conceivably play their way back in, but that was a tough loss. And the Chiefs have the most momentum right now in football and in the NFL right now. They've really turned things around after a couple of tough losses. And that's the Chiefs' mantra over the years. A lot of tough losses, a lot of close games. In the years where they actually turn some of those into wins, they end up being a playoff team. In the years that they don't, they're not a playoff team. Well, this year they've turned enough of those into wins, at least lately. And right now they're right on the precipice of it, right up there with the Steelers, right up there with the Jets. And of course, and then on the next two, you got the Colts, the Texans, and the Bills, still right there at 6-6. So Chiefs looking good right now. So here's what you left with. We mentioned all the games and the results of them and all the big highlights from them. When you look at the playoff positioning right now, after everything that we just mentioned and after all the games coming out of week 13, the AFC has been fundamentally changed over the last couple of weeks with the Patriots' struggles. The Bengals are the 1 seed because of their tiebreak over New England and Denver based on their winning percentage in conference games. You have Denver at the 2 because they beat New England head-to-head. New England's the 3. Indianapolis right now would be the 4 because they win the tiebreak over Houston head-to-head. Of course, that will still play itself out. Your two playoff teams right now would be the Chiefs and the Jets, because the Chiefs have the best win percentage in conference games. The Jets had the tie-break over Pittsburgh because of the best win percentage in conference games. But, of course, the Steelers still have the same record as them. And you have the Bills, the Texans right out there. Right there. Waiting on the outside, looking in. Now, but both very much alive because they're only a game back. So that's what you're left with in the AFC. I think we can conceivably look at, and at this time of year, you start to look at teams and go, boy, you know what? Who really is still in it and who isn't? Remember we talk about weeding teams out? I think we can safely write off the Raiders at 5-7. There's just not enough time. The Dolphins at 5-7, I think we can safely rule out. And I obviously think we can write out the Ravens and the Jaguars at 4-8. So I think it's 8. Right now, it's 9 teams for 6 spots. 9 teams for 6 spots. And you know the Bengals are going to make it. You know the Broncos are going to make it. And you know the Patriots are going to make it because all 10 wins already. So 3 of those spots are pretty much locked up. And one of the AFC South teams are going to make it. So 4 of those spots are locked up. The rest of it's going to be made up of some combination of the 3-7-5 teams. You have the Chiefs, Jets, and Steelers, or maybe the Bills sneak in. So really, the only teams that have a chance at making it are these 9 teams. Cincinnati, Denver, New England, which are all going to make it. 10 wins already. Indianapolis, Houston, Kansas City, New York Jets, Pittsburgh Steelers, Buffalo Bills. Nobody else outside of those teams are going to make it on the AFC side. Right now, obviously, the Chiefs and the Jets are in right now, so they're the ones that have the best chance. I think the Steelers are going to make it. If I had to say right now, I'd lean towards Kansas City and Pittsburgh being the teams that make it. And I think Indianapolis will win the division. So that would mean that the Bills and the Texans and the Jets don't. But we'll see what happens. On the NFC side of things, you have Carolina, who's locked up the NFC South and is still unbeaten. You got Arizona, who clinched the playoff spot last night. We'll talk about that game in just a moment. So both those teams are in. The final 2 spots are reserved for the NFC North champion and the NFC East champion. Right now, the NFC North champion would be Green Bay because they won the tiebreak over the Vikings. Both head-to-head. Of course, the Vikings lost last night, so right now Green Bay would be in without a tiebreak. I forgot that the Vikings played last night. So Green Bay right now would be in at 8-4. Vikings are 8-5. And then the 4th spot would go to the NFC. We know the 4th seed is going to be the NFC East team because they're all going to. It's very likely that whoever wins that division could be under 500. Right now, the team that would make it would be the Redskins, because they get the tiebreak over the Giants and the Eagles based on head-to-head win percentage. The Vikings are still looking good for a wild card spot. They're 8-5, and right now Seattle would get a wild card spot at 7-5. Outside of that, you got 2 teams at 6-6, and the Buccaneers and the Falcons, and you got 2 teams at 3 teams at 5-7. The Eagles, the Giants, and the Bears. I think we can move the Rams out, the Rams and the Lions and the Saints out. Rams, Lions, Saints, 49ers, and Cowboys all out at 4-8. Now, I know Dallas conceivably could still probably win because of the way that the NFC East is. They're only a game back, but with no Romo coming, I think a lot of us, I don't know if a lot of people put too much stock in them, even still with the fact they're only a game out. So what you're pretty much looking at is outside the 6 right now that would be in. Tampa, Atlanta, Philly, New York. I guess maybe the Bears could still have a chance. Actually, you know what? I don't think so. So I'll leave it at Tampa, Atlanta, Philly, and New York are the only ones I can conceivably see. And the only reason why I put Philly and New York in there is because the division's back. They're tied with the Redskins. They're tied with the Redskins at 5-7. So they could, any one of those teams could conceivably make it. I mean, if Dallas pulls off a miracle of all their injuries and such, then I guess they can conceivably make it too because they're a game out. But again, I don't put that much stock in that. I don't think the Falcons are going to make it. Their momentum has been terrible. I mean, they just look like a lost team right now. And I don't think the Buccaneers are going to make it, despite how competitive they've been and how well, they played. I think the teams that are going to make it, I think the 2 wild cards are set. I think Minnesota and Seattle will be the 2 wild cards. For sure. I think both those teams will be the wild cards. Because you got to look at this. Minnesota's already at 8 wins. And the rest of these teams are only at 6. 6 and 5. And so, I mean, the rest of the field has it's Minnesota at 8 wins, Seattle at 7 wins. Everybody else has 6. I mean, you're going into week 14 now. If you're still sitting around at 5 wins or 6 wins, I don't think you're going to do it. The only reason why the NFC East teams can still do it is because their division's off. But I think Minnesota's going to be a wild card. Seattle's going to be a wild card. And the only spot left to fill will be the NFC East spot, which will probably come down to the wire. And if I had to guess, I'd probably say it's either going to be the Giants or the Eagles. I don't think the Redskins are going to get it. And I don't think the Cowboys will either. And the NFC East thing will go right down to the final day of the season. I know that for a fact. But Atlanta's just trending too far down. Tampa is just too, hit or miss. And I think they got a couple games left on their schedule. They're going to be tough. So I actually think your NFC is pretty much set, except for who will be the NFC East champion. If Green Bay doesn't win the division, there'll be a wild card. So I think that's where you stand there. So our playoff picture has materialized as to who still has a chance and who doesn't. And that's the way it usually is once you get into around week 13, week 14. So that sets us up for this week 14, which got underway last night with a great game, which I said earlier, I wish I would have done this show yesterday because I would have made a pick for this game. Last week 14 got underway with a great game. I mean, probably the best Thursday night game they had all season between the Minnesota Vikings and Arizona Cardinals. Minnesota Vikings, of course, an NFC wildcard as of right now. Arizona, the NFC West champion as of right now. Great game, great finish, great balance both sides of the ball for both teams. One of the more well-played games of the season, I thought. Both teams looked very good last night. Both teams did. But ultimately, Arizona pulled off the win, 23-20. A big win for Arizona, who solidifies themselves more firmly as the NFC West champion, more than likely. It was a very important game too for the Arizona Cardinals because they clinched their playoff spot, and they're going to. I think their next win I think is going to clinch in the NFC West, I believe. So, this more or less it's just formality for Arizona at this point. And the Vikings, of course, this was a big loss for them because this knocked them out of first place in the NFC North, as the Packers once again reclaimed that spot. So the Vikings still looking good for a wild card, but this was a tough loss for them. Back-to-back losses to Seattle and Arizona. Tough loss for them. I think it's a tough schedule, too. Bridgewater wasn't bad, 25 for 36, 335 yards. This Arizona just got the job done. Did great on defense, held them down, kept Minnesota contained, especially in the running game, and got the job done. So Arizona with a 23-20 win punches their ticket to the playoffs, looking for redemption after last year's injury plague second half of the season for them. And the Vikings drop out of first, but still very much in play as a wild card and still, again, has a chance at the division as they're only a game back. So that was a big game last night that got week 14 started out on a good note. There are a host of other games this weekend with playoff implications, so let's get to it right now. And as always, we will start off by looking at the games that we're going to make picks for our Pick 6 challenge, our NFL picks of the week. And of course, for those that do not know, I feel the need to explain this every week so people don't get confused. Pick 6 challenge is our weekly NFL pick segment where we pick 6 games. Myself and my former technical producer, Jeff Tech, who used to be our technical producer while we were on Talk Shoe, he's no longer with us here on the show. He doesn't how he doesn't appear on the show anymore, or no doesn't involve himself with the show anymore. But as kind of like a treat for our longtime fans that carried over from our Talk Shoe days, we said we'd continue the competition between myself and Jeff Tech as far as NFL picks go, at least for the rest of this season. So that's when I say that we make picks, I mean myself and Jeff Tech make picks, and we keep track of how we do each week, and that's how we compete back and forth the whole season on how many we get right and all that stuff. So that's what we do. We pick 6 games, and usually the hope is that we'll each pick a different team from each game. We won't make the same pick, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So, and we keep a tally of how we do. Last week, before we get going on this week, both me and Jeff Tech were 4-2. I had the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Steelers, and the Bills right, and the Vikings and the Giants wrong. He had the Jets, the Seahawks, the Bills, and the Chiefs right, and the Colts and the Falcons wrong. So we both were 4-2. And let me see how we did. Through week 13, I had, 4-2 and 4-2. I was 50 and 32. Jeff Tech was 47 and 35. So still about 3 games out. So still very close. As we, he started off the season well. I was terrible. I came back, and he was terrible. And now we're both kind of going even with it. So far through week 13, I am 50 and 32 on the season in regards to picks. Jeff Tech is 47 and 35 in regards to picks. All right, so we go into this weekend. The first game we're going to pick is a 1:00 p.m. Eastern game on CBS from Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, PA. It is the 6-6 Bills, 3-3 on the road, at the 5-7 Eagles, who are 2-3 at home. Eagles coming off a huge win against the Patriots on the road that kept their season alive. It tied them for first place in the division. The Bills coming off a big win. Coming off a big win. I guess who did they play last week? I even forgot who they played last week. The Bills. I apologize. Wow. The Texans. A big win against the Texans. So both teams come in with some momentum, but the Eagles, I think, have the more momentum. The Eagles, I think, playing at home, combined with the momentum they carry out of the Patriot game, knowing they have to win each game. I think the Eagles turned a corner last week. Their offense finally had rhythm again, which is the key to that team. I think their defense, look, we all know their defense, of all the offensive teams out there, their defense is probably the best. Because they have a lot of playmakers on their defense. Their defense tends to thrive when their offense does. I think you're going to see a very complete performance here for the Eagles. The Bills will try to contain them, but I don't think they will. I think the Eagles come in with way too much momentum and playing at home. I think there's just too much against them in this game. I am going with the Eagles in this game. All right. Forgot about Jeff Tech's pick. Jeff Tech is going to go with the Bills, which is kind of surprising. I thought he'd go with the Eagles, but all right. And by the way, for those that wonder, again, those that are new to the show, maybe never tuned in before, Jeff Tech's, we know which games we're going to pick prior. So he always emails me the teams that he's going to pick. So it's not like he's, sending them to me as we do these picks. We discuss these things before the show, and he sends them to me by email, and I just note them on the show. So keep that in mind. I just want to make sure that I explain everything to people so they know what's going on in the segment and everything. So people don't get confused. Because we do have a lot of new fans since we came to Google and YouTube. So I want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. All right, next game we're going to pick is a 1:00 p.m. Eastern game on CBS from Paul Brown Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio. The 7-5 Steelers, 2-3 on the road at the 10-2 Bengals, 5-1 at home. the chance for really the Bengals to basically salt away the division, even though they're pretty much set anyway at this point. Even if they lose this game, the Bengals are okay. But for the Bengals, they have, you know, bigger implications beyond the division right now. They're trying to hold on to one of those top 2 seeds so they can at least have a bye. In order to do that, they're going to want to win out because you know that you can't expect the Patriots to lose any more games. So a lot at stake here for the Bengals, and a lot of stake here for the Steelers, who need every win they can get to hold on to a wild card. Look, Cincinnati has made this season all about making statements and breaking that glass ceiling. You know, they had a couple weeks ago, they went through a little bit of a bad stretch, kind of like they did last year. Maybe not as long or lengthy or as pronounced, but they did. They've kind of settled in again last couple weeks. This would be a good chance for them to kind of show people that the first half of the season wasn't a fluke. I expect them to do that. I think they're going to come out here at home and have a great game. I think the Bengals are going to win this game. I think it's going to be a close game, especially with the Steelers coming in with some momentum here. But I think the Bengals have stabilized, and I think this game being at home and with them wanting to make a statement here and knowing that they win this game, they basically salt away the division, knowing what's at stake, home field, all that stuff. I like the Bengals in this game. It will be a close game, but I like the Bengals in this game. And Jeff Tech likes the Steelers, so. All right. Next game we're going to pick is here it is right here. Okay. I had to find it. Okay. Let me make sure I go down my checklist here. All right. 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern game on Fox from Charlotte, North Carolina. 6-6 Falcons, 3-3 on the road. 12-0 Panthers, 6-0 at home. I'm picking this game for one reason, because it's a game between two teams that you know, well, one of the teams is firmly in the playoffs and it's unbeaten, and the other team is a team that's trying to hang on and still try to find a way to get in the playoffs. This is the kind of like the Falcons' last gasp. If they have any chance, they have to win. This is a must-win for them. Now, I wrote them off after this week because I knew they were playing the Panthers, and I'm like, well, geez, you know, they're probably going to lose that game. And they're going to be 6-7, and then that's it. You know, if they have any chance in hell, they have to win this game. I don't think they will. First of all, it's on the road, and the Falcons are not as good on the road, even in their best years. And you're playing the Carolina Panthers, who are unbeaten, have a ton of momentum, coming off that come from behind win against the Saints last week. I think Carolina wins this game probably convincingly. And again, the only reason why I'm picking this game is because compared to everything else, it's a game between two teams that are on the winning side of things, and it has some playoff implications. So that's why I'm picking it. So I think Carolina in this game for sure, easily. And Jeff Tech does think Carolina as well. So that's one game we're going to have the same pick on. I can't say I blame anybody for picking Carolina in this game. All right. Next game we're going to pick. I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead and pick the 8:30 p.m. game because I for some reason I got that one ahead of the 4 o'clock game. I sometimes do that. When me and Jeff talk about the games before the show, sometimes we just think of them as we go, and sometimes they're out of order. But 8:30 p.m. Eastern game on NBC from NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. The 10-2 Patriots 4-1 on the road against the 6-6 Texans 4-2 at home. Boy, the Colts get a break. Last week they lose a game, but so did the Texans. This week the Texans get to play the Patriots while the Colts get to play the Jaguars. So this is a chance for the Colts to get out in front of the Texans here, because they know. And look, let's be honest here. I know this game is at home for the Texans. I know the Patriots are vulnerable, but I don't think the Patriots are going to lose to the Texans. They've lost 2 games in a row. So at some point, somebody's going to pay. You know, the Patriots are frustrated. They haven't liked their performance. The Texans lost last week. You almost felt like that was kind of deflating for them. You know, and the Texans being in it at this point has been a surprise. And I know they've beaten the Bengals, and I know they've had some good wins, but I think it ends here. But the Texans are only go as far as their defense goes for the most part. And I think their defense will get shredded in this game. I think this one's an easy pick. I think the Patriots easily win this game. And so does Jeff Tech. Again, I hate to pick games that I think are going to be one-sided, like this game and the Panther game. But again, you're trying to pick games between teams that still have something to play for because tend to be the better games. So, all right. 4:25 p.m. Eastern game on Fox from Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The 4-8 Cowboys 3-3 on the road at the 8-4 Packers 4-2 at home. A week ago, I might have said the Cowboys had a better chance in this game because of the way the Packers were playing, but I'd like to think the Packers got some momentum out of that Lions win because of how miraculous it was. Cowboys come in with some momentum, obviously coming off the Monday Night Football win against the Redskins. They know their season's still alive. They're only a game out. Unfortunately, you know, they're injured. They got a lot of injuries going on, especially Tony Romo being out. They caught a break against the Redskins. The Redskins gave that game away just as much as the Cowboys won it. And the Packers, I think, are a better team with talent-wise than the Redskins anyway. So you're playing a better team here. I don't think the Green Bay Packers are going to be giving this game away, like the Redskins did. They might make some mistakes, but I don't think you're going to get as many as the Redskins made in that game, which basically gave the Cowboys that game in a lot of ways. So they earned it. The Cowboys got themselves in the position to win it, but the Redskins, did give up a lot to the Cowboys there. So I like this game for the Packers. They're at home. They got this momentum. They got the momentum from the Lions win. I like this game for the Packers, so I'm picking the Packers here. I do not think it's going to be as one-sided. The one thing I've learned about the Cowboys without Rome was their defense has done a very good job. Their defense has been underrated this year. Their defense has kept them in a lot of games, and I think they'll keep them in this game here much longer than anybody would expect them to. So I don't think this will be as one-sided as the Patriot game will be or the Panther game will be, but I expect the Packers to win it. Maybe like a touchdown or something like that, So I'm going with the Packers, and Jeff Tech is as well. So a lot of the same picks this week for us. Only the first two games we had different picks. Kind of boring, but, that's the way some of these games are kind of leaning this week. So, all right, the final game that we are going to pick is a game between 2 5-7 teams, and this is really going to essentially be a playout game, I think. Even for the Redskins, who are in a division where even if they lose this game, they'd be still right there. 1:00 p.m. Eastern game on Fox from Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois. The 5-7 Redskins, 0-5 on the road at the 5-7 Bears, 1-5 at home. Again, even if the Redskins lose this game, theoretically they could still win the division in the NFC East. But I think you come out of this weekend, it'll be week 15. You only got 3 weeks left, and you'll be at 5-8. Assuming the Giants and or Eagles win, you'll be a game back with 3 weeks to go. I mean, again, at some point, so I essentially think this is kind of like a playoff game. Now, if the Bears lose, they're definitely out of it. So I think the Bears have far more on the line here. Again, if you're the Redskins, you still are there. It's just that it makes it a little bit harder. For the Bears, it'd be impossible, pretty much. So I think the Bears have more on the line. They're at home. The Bears, playing the Bears in December is always a tough preposition. Playing the Bears at Soldier Field in general is always a tough preposition. The Bears have played better over the last, the second, since that rough start they had in the early part of the season. They played better. I actually like the Bears here. I think the Redskins got kind of deflated last week. The Cowboys, the defensively did some good things too. I think the Bears the kind of things that the Cowboys did to the Bears, Cowboys did to the Redskins last week can be magnified by the Bears. It's not about just being physically imposing. It's about the fact that they covered downfield. They kept Kirk Cousins contained. If you keep it as a gritty kind of game, then the Redskins are in trouble because they like to kind of light things up and throw downfield. So, I think the Bears can do that. The Cowboys could do it last week. The Bears can do it. And I think they will do that. So I'm picking the Bears to win this game. And Jeff Tech has picked the Redskins. So, all right. And that's the 6 picks that we're going to make for this week. So, let's recap them right now. I'm picking the Eagles over the Bills. Jeff took the Bills over the Eagles. I picked the Bengals over the Steelers. Jeff took the Steelers over the Bengals. We both picked the Panthers over the Falcons. We both picked the Patriots over the Texans. Of course, he would pick that anyway because he likes the Colts. We regardless. I picked the Bears. Pardon me. We both picked the Packers over the Cowboys. And I picked the Bears over the Redskins. Jeff Tech picks the Redskins over the Bears. So 3 of our picks are different, 3 are the same. So at least there'll be some that are different. And those are our picks for Week 14 of the NFL season. Obviously, we'll look back at those picks next week, see how we did, and let you all know how we stand on the season. Right now, again, I am 50-32 on the season through Week 13. Jeff Tech 47-35 on the season through Week 13. Outside of those games that we made picks for, there are some other games going on in the NFL. Let me just give them what you know about them right now. You have the 49ers and the Browns at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern on Fox from Cleveland, Ohio. 4-8 49ers, 1-5 on the road. The 2-10 Browns, who are 1-5 at home. That game's pretty much meaningless. The surprise thing, but I'd probably lean towards the 49ers there. 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern on Fox from Edward Jones Dome in St. Louis, Missouri. 4-8 Lions, 1-4 on the road. 4-8 Rams, 3-3 at home. I'd probably go with the Lions. They've had a little bit more momentum. They've been playing a little bit better. The Rams kind of look a little deflated. So I'd go with the Lions here in a game that really doesn't matter much. So 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on Fox from Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. 4-8 Saints, 1-5 on the road. 6-6 Buccaneers, 3-3 at home. Buccaneers really, theoretically, still have something to play for here. They're kind of in it. Coming off a big upset against the Falcons last week. They made a history of beating teams, upsetting teams. Now, this wouldn't really be an upset record-wise, but I think many people would consider it an upset. They did beat the Saints. I actually would lean towards the Buccaneers beating the Saints and pulling it off. So, yeah, I'd say the Buccaneers I'd favor here because, again, they have more to play for. The Saints kind of look like they're demoralized a little bit. And it would be classified for many as an upset, but it really wouldn't be given the record. So, and Buccaneers had a tendency to beat the Saints in their building, just like they have to beat the Falcons or the Panthers in their building when they're, wanting to pull off the upset. So they're very much a team that likes to pull off upsets. I wouldn't be surprised to see them do that and beat the Saints again. 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on CBS from MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. You got the 3-9 Titans, 2-3 on the road, 7-5 Jets, 4-2 at home. Jets should win this one easily. They get a nice, real easy break this week. Colts and Jaguars, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on CBS. The 6-6 Colts, 3-3 on the road, playing at the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 4-8, 3-3 at home. The Colts and the Jaguars are always a close game, and it probably, because it is in Jacksonville, will end up being a close game because the defense will keep the Jaguars in it for it. And their offense have been playing better this year. So this is probably going to be a closer game than most people think it usually is. These two teams always play close games. I think the Colts will win it, but I don't think they'll win it by much. I think this will be kind of a scare game for the Colts. And they know the Texans are playing the Patriots. They know it's a good chance for them to get out by a game in front of the Texans. So I think they'll win the game, but I think it'll be a tough one. 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern game on CBS from Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. The 3-9 Chargers, 1-4 on the road. At the 7-5 Chiefs, who are 3-2 at home. Chiefs should win this one. Chargers are going to give them a game, but the Chiefs should win this one. 1 o'clock. No, we did that game. Here it is. 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern game on Fox from M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. 7-5 Seahawks, 3-3 on the road. At the 4-8 Ravens, 2-3 at home. The Ravens will give them a game, especially on defense, but the Seahawks can win this game. Too much momentum. They're playing too well right now. I think the Seahawks, even on the road, win this game easily. No Joe Flacco for the Ravens. The defense will keep them in it for a while, but no, Seahawks win that game. 4:05 p.m. Eastern, CBS, Sports Authority Field in Denver, Colorado. You have the 5-7 Raiders, 3-3 on the road, 10-2 Broncos, 4-1 at home. Raiders will keep it close for a while, but the Broncos are playing so well right now. Good momentum. Their defense has been good. Their offense has been, last week wasn't too good, but they were due for a down week. I expect them to be very efficient this week. They're back at home. They're at home. I expect a good well-rounded game here, and I think the Broncos win it by a good margin. I don't think it'll be a complete blowout, but I think it'll be a good margin. Let's see, Cowboys, Packers. And then the final game for Week 14, Monday night game, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN from Sun Life Stadium in Miami, Florida. You have the 5-7 Giants, 2-4 on the road versus the 5-7 Dolphins, who are 2-3 at home. Dolphins have played better since the changes they made to their personnel. Giants had a bad couple weeks here. They're on the road here. I've seen a lot of people think the Dolphins can win this game. I think the Dolphins will make this a competitive game. I think the Giants are going to win this game. I think that their backs are against the wall. They know they have to win. They have to control their own destiny and stay in this. Then they have to keep winning games. They know they put themselves in a very difficult position. When the Giants' backs are against the wall, they usually put on their best performance, especially when they're playing a team that they really should beat, and they should beat the Dolphins. I think the Giants will win this game, but I think the Dolphins will keep it very, very close. I'm giving the Giants probably more credit than I should. A lot of people think this is a kind of a 50-50 kind of game. I like the Giants here. So, and those are all your games for Week 14 of the NFL season. So we'll see how it goes. It should be a very interesting week. Unlike last week, I think there's more big games, especially between potential playoff teams. So it should be an interesting week. So, all right. Before we wind down, we didn't do this last week, but I promised we would do this week. We usually end these football shows by answering some questions or addressing some comments that were sent to us by email, Facebook, or Twitter. We did not do it last week, so I want to do it this week because, if you're going to make something a regular segment, you don't have to stay away from it for 2 weeks. We didn't do it last week, so let's do it this week. So let's look at what's in the email box. I've already picked out a few questions here. We already kind of addressed this already, but let's address it further. Regardless of what happens with the Eagles going forward here, do you think their big win against the Patriots in New England is enough to not only save Chip Kelly's job, but keep them from blowing up the team in the offseason? No, I don't. I think what it does is it gets the fan base and everybody else off the team's back for probably the rest of the regular season until they're officially eliminated from playoff contention. Because, look, that division hasn't gotten away from them yet. Okay, that division hasn't gotten away from them yet. They're tied for first place. The Patriot win was nice, but the big thing was the fact that it got them into first place again. So that's what they're concerned is getting into the playoffs and being successful. If they do that, then they've done something. If they don't make the playoffs, then they're going to make wholesale changes because, remember, we talked about this so much this year. Chip Kelly went out on a limb, completely changed the personnel, completely changed his team. It's all him. It's his identity. He's all about offense and no huddle. And look, if it flops, it flops. He made them go out there, change quarterbacks and, change running backs, all this. He's on the hook for all this. If they don't make the playoffs, he's fired. He's fired. Especially in this division when the first place is 5-7. With the talent the Eagles have, they should not only should they not be 5-7, they should be in first place by a lot. Just the way it is. Let's see here. What do you think the chances are of the Panthers going into the playoffs unbeaten? Well, one of the big hurdles to them doing that was last week against the Saints, and they beat the Saints. So that's a point in their favor. Let's see. They got the Falcons, the Giants, the Falcons. They got 2 games left with the Falcons, a game left with the Giants, and a game left with the Buccaneers. Chances are good. I think they're going to sweep the Falcons. I think they're going to beat the Giants. And again, the Buccaneers at home. I think the Panthers are going to go into the postseason unbeaten. I'd say 80% chance. I think the one game left that was a hurdle for them was last week. Now, of course, they might decide to do what some teams have done in the past when they've been unbeaten late and rest some players. I don't know if they're planning to do that or not, but we'll have to see. But I'd say 80% chance they do it at this point. Let's see. Which teams from the outer fringe of the playoff hunt do you think have the which team do you from the outer fringe of the playoff hunt in each conference do you think still has a chance at making the playoffs? Okay, sorry about that. Which team? I skipped a couple words. Which team from the outer fringe of the playoff race do you think has the best chance at making the playoffs in either conference? So outer fringe would mean teams that, as of today, wouldn't be in the playoffs. In the NFC, I'm not going to count the NFC East teams because they're all reasonably still in it. I guess in the NFC, I'd have to say the Buccaneers. Because the NFC East teams are all still like kind of there, and one of them's going to win the division. The other one's not going to have a chance at a wild card. So I'll say the Buccaneers in the NFC. Even though they got a tough schedule, you know. I mean, that'd probably be the best, you know, outside the NFC East teams, you know, who all have a better chance. Because of the division being right there. I don't think the Falcons do it. It's not playing well enough. AFC is a little bit of a easier thing to figure out. On the AFC side of things, I think it's the I mean, you classify the Steelers on the outer fringe right now because of tiebreakers. So I'd say the Steelers as of right now. But I think the Steelers are going to slip in. I think the Jets are going to fall out. So I'm not going to make a pick for the Steelers. I think the Steelers are going to end up going. I'd say I think the Jets. And I know the Jets right now would be in at the season ends here, but I think the Steelers are going to sneak in. So I say the Jets. I say the Jets. I think they've been more consistent than the Bills have been. It's between the Jets and the Bills. I think the Jets would be the team, though. Personally. All right, we picked some teams. We picked 3 questions from the NFL. Let's get some college football questions here, just to balance it out. Let's see here. In light of how the final college football playoff rankings fell, what do you think would have happened if Ohio State had not lost late in the season? Well, they would have been in the Ohio State would have been in. I mean, that's a given. Ohio State would have been in. Michigan State wouldn't have been. Only one Big Ten team was going to make it. Ohio State would have been in. Ohio State would have been the 3, and you would have had Oklahoma at the 4. Simple as that. Nothing else would have changed, really. Let's see. Well, I kind of answered that when I talked about the Heisman, so I'm not going to say that. Talk about that. Of the teams that did not make the playoffs in college football, which of those teams do you think is the best? Of the teams that did not make the college football playoffs, which of those teams do I think is the best? I think Iowa is the most consistent, so I'd say Iowa. I think talent-wise, it might be Ohio State, but I think Iowa was far more consistent than them all year. You know, with the quarterback situation, I think Ohio State had too much going on, and I think that's what ultimately cost them. But inconsistently perform well. So I'd say Iowa. It's because they were the most consistent. Do you think North Carolina would have had any chance at making the top 4 had they beaten Clemson? I know in previous weeks you had mentioned it, but considering how everything ended up, do you really think there would have been a chance for them to have made it if they had beaten that Clemson? No, I don't. No, I don't. I mean, we will never really know because it all hints on whether they actually beat them. I think the one thing we do know is that they had beaten them, Clemson would have fell out. And the interesting thing, too, is you see the Michigan State-Iowa game, the way it played out. Iowa didn't drop at all. You know, they still, they dropped one spot. So based on how that was, if North Carolina had beaten Clemson, it almost does make you wonder if if Iowa would have made the playoffs too with Michigan State, even with the loss. Based on it, they clearly valued Iowa high after that Michigan State game. And they know it came down to the end of that game. I mean, that they clearly valued it because they didn't drop them. Stanford won. They could have easily put Stanford at 5. They didn't. They could have moved Ohio State up. They didn't. They dropped Iowa a spot. That shows you they thought very highly of Iowa. So that does make you think, to your point, that if Clemson or Alabama had lost, they might have tried to get Iowa, put Iowa in that top 4. They probably would have, based on how they dealt with Iowa even after the loss. So that would seem to indicate, to answer the question, that North Carolina really never had a chance, even if they beat Clemson. You probably would have had Alabama move to 1, Michigan State go to 2, Oklahoma to 3, Iowa to 4. Clemson probably would have been at 5. They probably wouldn't even put North Carolina above Clemson. Because you got to keep in mind, North Carolina only had 1 loss. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think they would have made it. I don't think they would have. All right, so we're going to stop right there. Covered everything we needed to cover. So as always, the show might be over. It does not mean you have to stop interacting or contributing to our show. You can continue to send in feedback, questions about the show, the scheduling of the show, topic ideas, breaking news items related to sports, entertainment, or wrestling that you want to make sure we cover. Reactions or comments to things that we said on the show, things we did on the show, topics we did on the show, any of those things you can do via email, Facebook, and Twitter. You can email us at itspotlight411@gmail.com. You can follow us and tweet us at itspotlight411. Please remember to use the hashtags, hashtag itspotlight411 or hashtag ITS5. ITS5, of course, representing our 5th anniversary on the air as a podcast. So use one of those hashtags if you can. It helps promote the show for us. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for In the Spotlight 411 on Facebook. And then once you find our page, make sure you like our page. We encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest information about our show. As far as catching up on our show, should you have missed any episodes or missed a part of an episode, or you want to rewatch an episode, best way to do that, and the only way to do that, is here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. So just search for In the Spotlight 411 here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube, and you'll have access to all 23 of our episodes since we debuted here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. That includes this episode as well. So when you search for us on here, you'll find our channel. You'll have access to all those episodes, and you can catch up, rewatch them, whatever you have to do. So again, just search for In the Spotlight 411 here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. For those of you that prefer audio format, as I mentioned last night on our primetime show due to some changes that we plan on making to the show, and this is a decision on my part. It's funny because for weeks we've been waiting for our new host site and everything to be up and running, and it was. And then I looked at some feedback for our show, and I decided to make some creative decisions. And because of that, and because of the holidays, everything, so you know what? Let's wait. Let's wait until the first show of the new year, 2016, and we'll have our new host site and have all that up and running, and everything will be good to go. So Makes me look like a complete flake because for weeks I keep telling everybody, oh, we're just waiting for tech support to get the host site ready. We're just waiting for that. We're waiting for that. And then when it finally gets ready, I say, guess what? We're going to wait a few more weeks. So I apologize for that, but I think it's the right decision for the show and for a lot of reasons. And I'll explain more of those reasons later on once you all see what we're going to do. It'll make more sense when that happens. But so for right now, if you're somebody that likes us in audio format, or if you're somebody that wants to, check out everything in one place, like all of our old episodes before our days here on Hangouts and on YouTube and all that. Well, that you can't really do that all quite yet. You can check out the older episodes, but you can't check out everything in one spot, including our recent episodes. So, so if you're waiting for us in audio format, you'll have to wait a few more weeks for that. So that means the only place to catch up on recent episodes of our show is right here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube, as I mentioned. Now, if you're a longtime fan or a new fan, a longtime fan maybe wanting to check out some of our older episodes again, or a new fan wanting to learn a little bit more about us or hear what our show has been like over the years, all that good stuff, you can check out our older episodes over on our old host sites, which are blogtalkradio.com, which has our first 31 episodes of our show, the original 31 episodes of our show on there. Or you can go to TalkShoe, Libsyn, or iTunes, which features all of our episodes from our days after Blog Talk Radio right up until we moved here to Google Hangouts and on YouTube. So if you're interested in checking out those older classic episodes, just head over to blogtalkradio.com, talkshoe.com, libsyn.com, or iTunes and search for us under our old title, In the Spotlight with Brian Gardner. Again, search for In the Spotlight with Brian Gardner, and then you'll be able to find all those episodes that you can check out whenever you wish. But again, for recent episodes, which means the last 23 episodes ever of our show, including this one. So for those episodes, you come here to Google Hangouts and YouTube and just search for us on here. That's where you can find all of our recent episodes since we debuted here. And that's where you can keep up with us until January when we have the new host site ready. So keep all that in mind. I know I'm getting really sick of talking about all that, but I want to keep you all informed and let you all know and make sure, especially since we keep gaining new fans every show. So I want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So, all right. So that's it. I want to thank myself for a great show, pat myself on the back, and thank all of you for your continued support and your continued contributions to the show. Thank you so much for for watching. I always say listening because I'm still thinking that we're still doing this just as audio, but I still got to get used to that. Sorry about that. It's very hard. Anyway, thank you so much for your contributions, your support, your patience, your understanding in regards to everything. We really do appreciate it. That is it for this week. We are done until next week again. For those that have forgotten, next week we're only going to do 2 shows, and that's going to be the way it's going to be for the rest of this year. For the next 3 weeks, 2 shows, and that means only 1 primetime show. So our next show will be our 1 primetime show for next week, and that will be on Wednesday, not Tuesday. Wednesday of next week, Wednesday, December the 16th, this coming Wednesday at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. That is our next show. It'll be a sports entertainment combo show. We'll cover all aspects of sports outside of football, obviously, because we read that for the football show. And, of course, we'll do our entertainment content for the week, box office beat, TV highlights, entertainment news, all that good stuff. That will be coming at you next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, we'll have a Football Blitz show next week. I'll let you all know the date and the time for that on Wednesday's show. It'll more than likely be Friday again at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern, but I'll let you know officially next Wednesday when it will definitely be. Right now, though, again, I'd say it'd probably be Friday at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern, but we'll see what happens. So with all that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday, a great weekend, and a great start to your week next week. We'll see you back here broadcasting live here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube for our next show in prime time next Wednesday, December the 16th. Had to think about it for a minute. December the 16th, broadcasting live here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, have a good day, everybody.